Hi, everybody. This is Steve Maggi from SMA Law Firm. Welcome to a new episode of Building the Bridge. And I have the honor of being here with Mark Vanderlinden, a cross-border tax expert with over 20 years in the United States, previously working for some of the big four firms, out on his own. He's helped a lot of my clients and a lot of international clients. So let's just go to the brass tacks, as they say. Tell us what are the misconceptions about international tax?
I think the biggest misconception, Steve, is that people think that taxes are a closed system because that's what they're used to. They live in a country and they know that from the date they're date they're born until the date they die, they're going to pay taxes. So in a system like that, basically the only question you have is when am I going to be taxed? You can maybe shift a little bit in time. But when you move from one country to another country, you're breaking through that system. You're going from the system where you came from to the US systems, and they're completely different, which basically means that double tax may arise, but also opportunities for planning may arise. And for some people, that may look to be good to be true, or when you're double taxed, it may look it's unfair, but the system is never meant to be fair in that respect. The rules are what the rules are, and countries have compromised between the way they divide the right to tax, and they stick to that compromise. And sometimes you're a winner and sometimes you're a loser. So the job is to get you on the winning side.
So the first misconception is that wherever I'm from, let's say I'm coming from Holland, taxes are going to be structured pretty much the same way in the US.
Exactly. And they're not.
And how does someone avoid getting double taxed or paying more than they should? I mean, part of your job is to minimize, to come up with strategies to avoid payment of taxes that are not necessary, right? So what should they go in knowing? A lot of the clients we work with are pre-planning. You do a lot of what's called immigration pre-planning with tax, right? What are the most important things, conceptions that they should have right and then they should understand before they start or when they're planning something with you?
Well, I think that the first epiphany that they should have is that taxes, to a certain extent, are plannable, right? And you're not talking about salary because you get salary paid bi-weekly or monthly and that's it. But you can determine when you sell your house and trigger the capital gain. You can determine when you make a payment, for instance, of alimony. In the US, a payment of alimony is non-deductible. In other countries, they are. So whether you make a payment before you come to the US or after you come to the US makes a big difference. The same thing with the moving allowance. In a lot of countries, moving allowances are not taxable. In the US, they are. So if you time your moving allowance to be paid before you move rather than when you arrive, it can save you 30, 40, 50% of the money you get in the moving allowance, which is significant.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I mean, you're mentioning things that I've heard of because I've seen you speak so many times over the last decade, but most people, they're just blown away. I can see their faces when you speak and they say, oh, I never thought about a moving allowance, or I never thought about my personal life, like an alimony payment or child support or who knows what. When people are in complicated situations, those situations are really compounded when it's an international context, right? When they're moving to another country, they have to think about things on both sides, right?
Yes, and I think taxes is not the most sexy thing in the world. People, and especially, of course, when you're doing an international move, it's important. You're looking at where you're going to live, getting a social security number, getting your visa right, school for your kids, all those things. And then tax is number 34 on the list. And a lot of times they don't get to number 34 on the list. And that's why it's great that you can outsource that and have somebody maybe quarterback you to say, well, these are four things you can do where you can make money and maybe even a lot of money. These are the 5 things you should do because you're going to lose a lot of money. And at least you have the playing field mapped out for you. The game plan is not for the clients to learn about international tax or learn how it works. No, the game plan is what should you do and what shouldn't you do. And simple as that.
Do you think that individuals should have more of a corporate mentality? Because, we work a lot together with companies that are setting up in the US, and they're always thinking about what formation is the right one for them, which state should they set up in. A lot of their decisions are based on taxability. What states don't have a corporate income tax, or what's on a state level, what's the income, not the income tax, but also the sales tax issue. They're always thinking about tax minimization. But individuals, especially like the ones you mentioned who are coming as employees, I think they think that everything's already set up for them. They don't really have to do any planning. So how do they change their mentality?
I think you're right. I mean, I think in the corporate form, people and the management are looking out for the interest of the shareholder. At any cost you can reduce is something you look into, and taxes are nothing more than a cost, right? And as you know, with any cost, you cannot reduce them back to zero, but you can reduce them significantly. Right. That's not the mentality of the average person who pays taxes and sees taxes as a necessary evil, a couple of times a year or once a year. And again, that is generally true in a closed system. But imagine if you're breaking through that system, now you're taxed for, let's say, 3-4 months in the country where you came from. You're taxed the remaining months in the US. So generally, every country, an income tax system starts with lower rates, and they get higher the more income you earn. So if you can break your income in 2 buckets, one bucket taxed in country A, one bucket taxed in country B, you by definition have the lowest rates in both countries. So definitely you can reduce the rates. And then there are certain mismatches, as what I discussed before with the moving allowance deduction or the alimony payments. And there are a bunch of other examples whereby one country taxes it and the other country doesn't. So the benefit that you should derive, I said it before, you can time this. You can make the decision when you're going to trigger an expense. You're going to decide when to sell an asset, whether it's shares in a company that you own for a while and there's a capital gain on that, or a house that you own and that you want to sell. Those are all questions that you should answer in that preface. And it makes a lot of sense, as you said, to just sit down before you move and think about what are the game rules here? What are the possibilities for me here?
It sounds like the misconception also doesn't stop applying once the person is in the US, because a lot of our clients will come to the US for a few years, maybe a decade, but sometimes they decide to leave. Even when they have a green card or they're citizens, they decide to go back to their home country or move somewhere else. So in a way, you're almost always having to pre-plan and plan as you continue to move forward in life.
I mean, every change, especially if it's a big change, is an opportunity or a potential pitfall, right? And looking at a very painful one, but a very common one that's made, right? You're coming from another country, so you're focused on all the other things in life that are important: school, house, where you're going to live, getting set up in the US. So your house that you have in your foreign country, you're going to live in it until you move to the US. You're going to get set up in the US. You're going to find an apartment, or you're going to rent, or you're going to buy. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 months in, you're settled. What are we going to do with the house? Well, let's sell the house because we're going to stay in the US. Well, in the US, capital gains on houses are taxable. In a lot of countries, they're not. So by selling your house, once you come into the US, you may trigger a tax. And the US tax is 20%.
Unbelievable.
I just had a client.
The property is elsewhere.
Yeah. I just had a client that had to pay $45,000 in US tax because they sold their house when they were in the US and not before. And actually, they became a client after the problem rise. I wasn't able to plan ahead for them. Otherwise, we could have avoided it.
Sounds familiar, yeah. That's the worst kind of client. That's the one we don't want. We want the ones that come to us before, so we can fix it before it actually happens, right? Before that problem arises.
Yep.
So if someone wants to get in touch with you and they have questions, they want to set their record straight with you and not have those misconceptions, and they're really interested in planning because they know it's in their best interest to do so, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think we're going to show my email address and my cell phone number directly here. And I think just bear in mind, I've been doing this for 25 years. I know exactly where to look. Within a half an hour, maybe an hour max, we can solve 90 to 95% of your questions. And my game plan, my approach to this is contrary to when I was working in consulting for a company, when the game plan was make as many hours as you can so you can charge to the client. My game plan now is to be as efficient and client focused as possible. So as I said, doing a live call whereby we connect the client questions to my knowledge base, where we connect the facts that they have in their particular background to my knowledge base, you get an immediate outcome based on my experience pretty fast. And as I said, we can see exactly what the areas are that need further attention and what areas you should not pursue. Because another thing that I see a lot is people talk and they meet somebody at a function somewhere and they say, oh, I've got this and this, I've done this and this. And they come to me and say, can I also do that? And sometimes the answer is no. Why? Because every tax consequence is a result of certain facts, right? The input. And if the facts of that person you talk to are different than yours, then your outcome is going to be different. If they come from a different country, if they have a different visa status in the US, right. All those things, there's no one size fits all. And that's, I think, why it's important to tailor my knowledge. And it's always a joint venture between your background, your facts, and my knowledge. Yeah. I don't believe in the almighty advisor that knows everything and here you go, it's a pre-planned outcome of every question you're going to ask me. No.
Yeah, there are, in my field, it's the same. There is no cookie cutter plug and play solutions. You have to work with someone who understands every facet of your background and what your plans are in order to plan the best way possible.
And the benefit I think that I try to offer is, I mean, of course, yes, when you stay your clients, you steer them away from the pitfalls, you're saving them taxes, which is a great benefit. But you can also steer them to benefits. And then a lot of times, I mean, I generally take the approach that if the fees you pay are lower, substantially lower than the amount of money you make out of it, you got yourself a good deal, right? And that's the way to look at it. It's not an expense per se, it's an investment in a more optimized structure. And especially in a system where you change things, as you said, that's when you can optimize.
Fantastic. Thanks, as always, for your time and for your knowledge, Mark.
Oh, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.